Hi. So in the last chapter, we read that Gray had just died. And so now Pax knows where the army camp is, and he senses some kind of scent that Peter may be nearby. So now that he doesn't have to care for Gray anymore, he is off and running looking for Peter. So we're going to start chapter 18 now. And we probably won't get through all of 18 on this video because 18 is kind of a long chapter. So we'll get as far as we can, and then the next site will be chapter 18 continued. Okay, so Peter dropped from the beam where he caught sight of Vola limping through the rain toward the barn and tried not to look guilty. Vola was already suspicious that he had been doing more than the exercises she had ordered, and he was, doubling them usually, and she wasn't happy about it. Takes a healthy adult 4 weeks to do what you're trying to do in 1 week. You're bound to hurt yourself, she had warned him several times. In just these few days, it had become an old argument between them. He watched her shake off water in the doorway, and it reminded him of Pax, the dog-like way that he used to do it. Was it raining where he was, he wondered? Would he still shake himself off if there was no warm, dry place to come into? Peter shivered and rubbed his arms, thinking about poor Pax. What's the matter? Asked Vola. You look like you're in pain. Do your arms hurt? No, but of course they did. But it was a good hurt, a soreness that meant he was getting closer to being strong enough to go. He dropped and did 3 push-ups, his cast resting on his left ankle. See, he said, I'm fine. Can I do the obstacle course now? It's not raining as hard. No, said Vola. You can't get that cast wet. I'll figure out some way to waterproof it before you leave. But for today, stay in here. You did all the drills already. Beam work, sack dragging, cinder blocks, all that core work you taught me? Vola nodded to the wall of marionettes. Why don't you practice them? She pointed to the marionettes. Those are puppets. Because those puppets don't get me a minute closer to my fox, Peter wanted to say. He sighed deeply and rolled his eyes instead. Vola was unmoved. How are you coming with them anyway? She asked. Okay, good, and he had practiced a few times and gotten a little better. The strings didn't tangle up anyway. Sometimes, though, the controls still worked exactly the opposite of the way he expected them to, and the puppets always looked twitchy as if they were being electrocuted. But he had run out of patience. Let's do the show. I'm going to be leaving soon, Vola. Peter lifted the crutches, which moved as if they were extensions of his arms now. I made it to the ridge and back twice yesterday. I was on these things almost 6 hours. I would have done 8 except you took them away, remember? I'm ready to go. And of course, he's talking about his crutches. Vola dropped a handful of nails into an overall pocket and slid a hammer into her belt loop. Then she leveled him a gaze. Show me how you work Sinbad. She's talking about the puppet again. Peter gave another sigh, which Vola ignored again and picked Sinbad off the wall. He swept the puppet over a bale of hay and dropped it onto the wooden egg in the big tin bowl that Vola had painted to look like a nest. He knew how clumsy it looked, but he sent her a hopeful glance. Really? That's the desperate hero, risking his life for a chance to escape the mighty rock? Vola took the controls from him, and instantly the marionette seemed to become flesh and blood. Think about what he wants. He wants to escape, she said, as if Peter had asked for a lesson. So, drop his arms and lead with them, like this. See, kind of low and sneaky. Have him sink down into the nest till he's hidden behind the egg. Once he's there, you can let him go and fly the rock over the nest from the other side. From the right, remember, so it doesn't tangle Sinbad's strings. Bring it down directly onto the egg, nice and slow, so the magnets in its talons catch hold of the ones in Sinbad's hand. So she's trying to tell him how to operate these marionettes, but of course Peter's really not interested. They don't move like that for me, he said. Why don't you just set up a mirror and watch yourself act it out? Vola glared at him. It's the third condition, and it's not optional, so come over here. She carried the puppet to her workbench. He wants to move. All the puppets want to move because I made them that way, she said. You just have to show them how. Your muscles to theirs. Your muscles to theirs. She took off Sinbad's cloak, and then, to Peter's shock, she unstrung his wires. She reached for a screwdriver and disassembled the puppet until he was nothing more than a pile of scattered parts. Then she held the screwdriver out. Peter clamped the crutches under his armpits and raised his palms, as if to say, "Oh no." "You watched me, didn't you?" she asked. "Well, yeah, but I just stopped in for some tools. I'll be back in an hour. You'll have this puppet put back together again, and you won't have any more problems after that." She slapped the screwdriver onto his hand and left without another word. So she took the puppet all apart, and now she wants him to put it back together. Ooh. It wasn't actually that hard. The marionette's knees and elbows were simple one-way hinges. The shoulders and hips carved wooden ball joints, which Peter could see allowed for greater movement. The hands and feet were fastened with leather straps. The stringing of them, however, was trickier. But once he figured out that the hands had to work off the control that moved like a dragonfly, he was able to figure out the others. And Vola was right there. After he had refastened Sinbad, he could move the puppet more smoothly. "Your muscles to theirs," Vola had said. And sure enough, Peter was able to translate the movements that she had suggested through his own body onto Sinbad's. "Your muscles to theirs." Didn't work for the rock, though. Peter flexed his shoulders, swooped his arms, but the bird only lurched a few strokes and then fell as if it had been shot. The bird's glittering gaze seemed a reproach. "I'm sorry, bird. I don't know what you're supposed to be doing, though. Are you trying to eat the guy? Are you protecting your egg?" Suddenly, Peter wanted to know the rock's story, wanted to get it right. He found the slot where Vola kept the Sinbad book. As he drew it out, he heard a quiet thunk. There was something at the back of the niche. He pulled it out. A square tin, faded yellow, and decorated with the peeling words, "Sunshine Biscuits." He steadied it on his palm and thought back to the battered cookie tin he had found at his grandfather's, the one with its heap of soldiers guarding the surprising photo. He pried off the lid. Inside was a stack of index cards, scrawled with handwriting he had already come to recognize. He knew instantly that he held in his hand Vola's personal truths, the ones she kept hidden. He snapped down the lid, not wanting to invade her privacy, but it was too late. He had already read the top one. "I would have been a good teacher," it said. It wasn't a terrible truth, and it didn't even seem all that personal. Still, he wished he hadn't seen it. He pushed the tin back into the niche and slid the book in after it, just as Vola came back in. He pointed to the marionettes. "I've got it now," he said. "Let's do the scene." But Vola only walked to her workbench and poured oil onto a whetstone. "Not yet," she said. "We need a stage first. I'll put something together when I've got some free time." "A stage?" he said. "You didn't say anything about a stage." "The marionettes don't just swing around in thin air over a couple of hay bales." She turned around and raised a palm to cut off Peter's protest. "Listen, Peter, I will see that soldier's story the way it should be seen. You'll have to respect how much that means to me, even if you don't understand it. Which you should, by the way. You carrying that charm around, it's the same thing. You're telling that story of your mother's for her." "But it will take so long to build a stage," said Peter. "And there's no hurry. You're going to be here another week anyway." She clumped back to the workbench, sat down hard, and began selecting tools. Discussion over. Peter flung himself onto a stack of hay bales. Another week of this and he would go crazy. The word struck him. He didn't think of Vola as crazy anymore. He propped himself up on his elbows and studied her as she polished her tools, noticing how carefully she lifted and cleaned each one. How, when she finished, she laid it precisely in its place. There was a calm purposefulness to her movements that he liked, a kind of predictability. Francois waddled in and yawned. He climbed to a crotch in the rafters above the workbench and started washing himself before a nap. It occurred to Peter that, like Francois, he had grown comfortable with Vola. Peter craned his neck to see what she was making. A handle. She had brought in a broken hoe and she was giving it a new handle. A simple thing, and yet it struck him as almost magic, kind of like his crutches. Before he'd had them, he had been helpless. Vola had nailed a couple of boards together, and now he could swing over miles of rough country, quick and sure, just like magic. He pulled the crutches over and braced them under his arms, feeling the familiar comfort their sturdy strength brought him. He swung over to the workbench. "I want to make something," he said. "Will you show me?" Vola leaned back to study him hard. After what seemed a full minute, she nodded. "No sense letting your brain go to rot. You know anything at all about woodworking with wood?" Carve away from yourself. That much I know." "Oh, well, there's a start," she said. "But that's not what I meant." Vola chose a fresh block from her wood bin and scented it on the workbench. "Who is the master here?" Excuse me?" asked Peter. Peter understood that this was a test. He looked at the wood blank and still and waited. Then he looked at the neat arcs of gleaming tools, so eager to cut they seemed to tremble. "You're the master." Vola nodded. She selected a spoon-tipped chisel and a mallet, and then gave the block the same searching look she had given him a few minutes ago, as if she were trying to read some secret message below the surface of the wood. She tapped the chisel into the fresh wood. It cut with a clean snap, and a curled chip flipped off onto the bench. She turned to Peter. "And now? Who's the master now?" Vola's face told him nothing, but the wood, its missing wedge now a question, demanding a response, it spoke. "The wood is?" he said uncertainly. "That's right," Vola agreed. "From this moment on, the wood is the master. The carver is servant to the wood. All craftsmen are servants to their craft. Once you decide what you want to make, the project is the boss. You know what you want to make?" she asked him. The answer came right away. How do you carve a fox?" he asked. As soon as the words left his mouth, Peter braced for the answer he figured was coming, about how he should figure it out for himself, but Vola surprised him. "Well, Michelangelo once asked how he had created one of his statues, and he said, 'I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set it free.' Might be a good way to think about it. Of course, if you're going to try to find the fox in the wood, you'll have to start with some wood." She motioned Peter to follow her to the wood bin. "Different woods, different merits. Basswood's easy to carve, holds fine detail, and it's light. I use it for the marionette's head. Now, this pine wood..." "Oh, well, white ash is good for baseball bats," Peter offered. "It's really hard." Vola passed the pine block from one hand to the other in silence for a moment. "Speaking of which," she turned to Peter, "you don't really own a bat. You love baseball, but you don't own a bat?" "Well, I'm more of a fielder," he said. "So what? You wait for someone to hit the ball, then you go get it? That's just reacting. Don't you want to hit the ball too?" "Well, that's not how it is. Once I've got the ball, I'm in control. I'm not reacting. I'm making choices. And I hit. The team has bats. You don't know anything about baseball, do you?" "Maybe I don't know baseball." She tossed the wood back into the bin with a shrug. "But I'm starting to know you, and I think you need yourself a bat." So maybe the fox is going to take the second base, second fiddle, and he's going to be making a bat first. We'll find out. Stay tuned.